This is North Coast Perspectives. I'm James Faulk. Just when we all thought it was safe to get out and get around, this week's COVID numbers tell us a different story, both here in Humboldt County and in much of the rest of the country. In the past week, Humboldt County has added 19 new cases to its total, including 9 that were added in one record-breaking day. California itself this week joined a long list of states breaking their own single-day case totals, and Texas has started undoing some of the steps it took to reopen its economy. As a nation, we've spent so much time talking about a possible second wave this fall, we neglected to notice that our fatal first wave has yet to be resolved. People are still contracting the illness, many are getting sick, and many will continue to die. This week, we also learned that Humboldt County is not immune from some of the racial disparities impacting the country. Humboldt County officials confirmed that there has been a disproportionate impact from COVID on the area's Hispanic community, a situation that has authorities scrambling to bridge language and other barriers to educate and inform people and curb those infections. We seem to be perched on a precipice. We know what to do and we know how to do it. Wear masks, keep socially distanced, and stay away from crowds. Yet boredom from quarantine, increasingly beautiful weather, mask aversion, and the upstart vacation season make these measures hard to follow. In an age of instant gratification, can we put off for now those things that may prove deadly in the long run? Only time will tell. Now the interview. Joining this week are two people from the Humboldt Area Foundation, CEO Bryna and Ron White, who has been instrumental in the foundation's Equity Alliance, which works for racial justice in the community. Thanks for joining us, Bryna and Ron.
Delightful to be here.
So essentially, you guys, the foundation issued a statement this past week reaffirming its commitment to working on racial equity and outlining a series of steps it would take to reach the goal of equality. Why was it important to come out with this renewed statement, this new effort to achieve equity, when you guys have been working on that issue for a while?
James, I'll answer that in maybe two ways. First of all, you can never state enough that there should be no tolerance for racial injustice, racial inequity, and just racism in general. We need to normalize that those things are entirely unacceptable and state them again and again and again as many times as we can, and reinforce in our community and in our nation that we're going to live and operate in different ways. So as many times as I need to say it, and we need to say it, we'll say it again. And then personally, I moved to the area less than a year ago. And while the Humboldt Area Foundation has been doing wonderful work in this area, as you mentioned, I needed to write my own words after living here and observing the community and many of its wonders and extraordinary things that you just mentioned about the region that people come for. I needed those to be my words in leading this organization.
Excellent. What are some of the concrete steps that the Humboldt Area Foundation will take to help achieve equity more so than they've done so far?
I think we're figuring that out, to be really quite honest. As mentioned, we've been doing many things historically. That includes obviously the Equity Alliance. It includes other programmatic efforts, including building healthy communities in Del Norte, where we work with Wild Rivers and the California Endowment. It includes incubating efforts like True North organizing networks, and even our NORCAN nonprofit group, and doing training and development with nonprofits in issues of equity. So there's a historic body of work that we've been doing. And in the future, I think that there's a lot more that we can do. And that includes, training and development of employers. It includes having a perspective on public policy. It includes also working with our donors and our donor community to help them make investments that matter. And frankly, it also includes working with our state legislators and paying attention to this area and issues of equity that you just mentioned that are unique here and often get passed up.
Now, one of the bullet points on the release that you guys put out was that you were going to try to diversify the board and possibly work to diversify your ranks in broader ways. Are there any concrete goals in that regard, or how are you going to go about pursuing that?
Yeah, there are some specific goals, and I think we're also going to work on that together as an organization and a board. I think one of my observations, I moved here from the Boston area. I was in New York prior to that. I was in Washington, D.C. prior to that. I come from areas that are incredibly internationally diverse, with race and religion and all sorts of incredible dynamism to pull from in the talent pool. And philanthropy is an unusual body of work, and we need to do what we can to cultivate local people to understand what philanthropy is here, to mentor young adults and young professionals from the time that they're in high school and in college, to understand philanthropic efforts and make them a part of our work in our organization. At the management level, we need to promote young individuals into development and mentorship programs. We need to promote people like Ron. I've been trying to ask him if he wouldn't take my job as CEO. And we need to work with our board on selecting members specifically that represent these different parts of our culture, including the Indigenous and Native American communities that have such incredible rich history here. And part of that work is going to be development here locally as well, but also potentially looking outside of the region. And both Ron and I come from other areas and decided that this was our home. And we're hopeful that diversity will increase locally, but also could potentially increase in pulling in wonderful people from other cultures, other races, from the state and nationally.
Excellent. Ron, you've done work with the Equity Alliance, and we've had you guys on the show to talk about the work you guys do. Now, I know that you also worked with some police departments working to help provide them with equity training. Real quick, can you describe for us what's involved in equity training? And since you're sort of right in the middle of the nexus between law enforcement and the reforms that people are calling for, what do you think needs to occur for police departments to A, understand the need for reform, and B, make those changes?
I think that's actually, the decisions around policy really should be community driven. And there's an effort to gather the Black community to actually put together a formal response to law enforcement, both the Sheriff's Office and Arcata PD and probably Eureka PD as well. That's going to be happening on July 5th, and I'm helping to sort of staff that effort along with NAACP and the major convener for the Black Men's Empowerment Network. And so I think that police can learn a great deal by listening to community experience. And let's face it, as a society, we've really piled a great deal on policemen's plates. We have mental health issues in a community. We criminalize that behavior and expect police to handle it. We have substance abuse issues. We criminalize that behavior and expect police to handle it. We have poverty issues. We criminalize that behavior and expect the police to handle it. And so the question is, how will they handle all of these things, including domestic disputes and misdemeanors, and protect property, and deal with serious crimes that actually wound the social fabric and may take a generation to get over, like the loss of a life, and that sort of thing. I think the community needs to dictate how we find a balance and actually ask a little bit less of our police.
Okay. What is it about this particular moment? And I mean, there was, you mentioned Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, their deaths, their tragic deaths, sort of kicked off a lot of this movement. But what was it about now, do you think, that is proving transcendent, as opposed to all the other times when people were demanding reform and not getting anywhere?
Yeah, I've walked this planet for a long time, and this isn't my first rodeo in seeing this kind of uprising. Um, and so it's a valid question. Is this a unique moment? I think that there are some things that are unique about this moment and that could actually lead to serious social change. One, COVID is actually acting like a sort of a mirror and a catalyst. It's a mirror to all the inequities that we have been building up over these centuries here in this country and around the world. And so literally, when the virus sent us to our room to think about what we've done among ourselves and to this planet, I think people became a lot more reflective. And the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Bryna literally, I think, came to us as kind of a shock in the midst of that reflection. I think the virus also catalyzed our compassion. And that's why people are literally beginning to sort of see this is not just a few bad apples. This is not that's causing this social pain. This is not something that we can just find our way through by being nicer to each other. We literally need to change structures, institutions, policies. And it's a global awakening. I suspect that part of the global awakening is the fact that by 2050, not a single major city in this world will be majority white. Not Moscow, not Copenhagen, not Chicago, nowhere. And we may be watching the emergent leadership and the emergent aspirations of what our society will look like materialize right before our eyes right now.
So I have the sad duty to report that's all the time we have for now. I wish I had a lot more time and a lot more questions to ask you guys, but thanks for joining us, and please have a great weekend.
Thank you.
The city of Eureka last week appointed Miles Slattery as interim city manager. Slattery, who comes from the city's community services department, has been with the city for several years and says he hopes to make the job his for the long term.
This is an interim appointment. I have every intention of doing what's necessary to help the city and move it forward. I plan on being here until, I retire and probably even after that. So, it's interim in the sense of the position, but moving forward, whether they choose to go a different route at the end of the interim appointment or not, I'll still be here. I really I love the city of Eureka. I've been passionate about towards the city ever since I was here in college, and definitely since I've come back. I really see a lot of potential in Eureka, and I think we've come a long way over the 14 years that I've been employed with the city, and I want to be a part of what the future has to come.
Slattery said the most pressing issue facing Eureka now and into the foreseeable future will be its budget health. Declining revenues were a problem before COVID, he said, so the city has had to think long and hard about where to trim fat and where to press ahead. The issue is made even more complicated by the fact that the voter-approved sales tax that has helped the city stay in the black these past few years will be expiring soon.
We're pretty far into the budget process already. All of our departments are taking cuts. We're actually going to council for some budget study sessions this week upcoming, and should hopefully have an adopted budget by the first meeting in July. As far as the state's concerned, it's not necessarily the cuts, it's the lack of help due to the pandemic. They've been getting money to larger municipalities and not to the smaller municipalities. There's, I believe, a bill out now that's looking at $50,000 to be given to smaller municipalities, which would not help us very much. So we're definitely looking at, due to this and other, we already had a declining revenue prior to this. Our projections were higher than what was actually happening. We've had declining revenues over the past few quarters, and this has definitely exacerbated that issue. And so we're definitely going to, have to move forward with the thought process of this being the new normal, and that this is how we're going to have to move forward. Fortunately, through these budget cuts, we haven't lost any services, but it's definitely going to be a significant cut. And we're hoping, that moving forward, that we can recover some of those revenues. Right now, the projections from the pandemic, we may not see the revenues that we saw in 18-19 for, another 5-6 years. So this is definitely going to be the new normal going forward. Measure Q is expiring in April 2021. And so we are working on a tax measure for this upcoming ballot. That'll be part of our budget study session discussions, as well as our council discussions in the next, month or so.
As city manager, Slattery will be overseeing Eureka's police department, just as calls for reform reach new heights. Slattery said he supports Police Chief Steve Watson. Many of the suggested reforms, Slattery said, are things EPD has already put into place.
We have a very unique police department. A lot of these calls for defunding of police is wanting to reallocate those funds towards social services. And it's very clear to me, knowing the inside of EPD, that a large portion of their funding already goes to social services. Their community services and enhancement team, CSET, is a complete division of their department that is the vast majority of their responsibilities are social services. We have our KEET program that has Uplift as a part of that, and that is what they do. They're there to help the most vulnerable of our community, and it's not your typical policing and enforcement type actions. It's providing services. It's connecting them with those services. We take on the responsibility of kind of helping them with that, and then also looking for housing for those individuals. So, they have taken cuts as a part of this process already, and they are definitely a part of the solution going forward. I think that the expansion of those social services is a great idea, because I think they've turned out to be very effective in conjunction with our Uplift team. They also do a lot, sensitivity training above and beyond what their post requirements are. They already have a community advisory board. There's probably a need to have discussions with the community and people of color to see any sort of adjustments that could be made to make that advisory board more effective. But that is in place, and we have the vehicle to start those discussions. And so I think that, EPD is in a good place, and I think that, their stance, just not only specific to this issue, but prior to this, have been not typical of police departments around the country.
Speaking of reform, the U.S. House of Representatives this week approved the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020, a comprehensive policing reform bill. According to a press release from North Coast Representative Jared Huffman, the legislation is a comprehensive approach to hold police accountable, end racial profiling, change the culture of law enforcement, and build trust between law enforcement and our communities by addressing systemic racism and bias to help save lives. The legislation would ban chokeholds like the one that killed George Floyd. It would lift legal protections that shield officers and in many cases prevent prosecution, and it would limit the use overall of deadly force. The bill passed the House on a vote of 236 to 181 in response to the national outrage at the killing of George Floyd. The bill's ultimate fate seems in doubt, however, as the Senate seems unlikely to pass the Democratic legislation. This is our moment of reckoning, a chance for Americans to finally confront our original sin of racism and change the systems and policies that have perpetuated it, Huffman said. What is your story, and how does it reflect the American dream? Can the details of your life help lift up others who are struggling? What does it mean to be an American in this moment, as all the forces of habit and history collide with a newly emerging vision of who and what we'd all like to be? It's called American Portrait, and we need your help to get it right.
Our country is home to millions of people. Each one of us is unique, and we're all part of the American story.
PBS American Portrait is a national storytelling project that asks you to submit your individual stories.
Through short videos, photos, the written word, and artwork, you can respond to one of a number of thought-provoking prompts.
Our opportunity to add our rural voice to the story.
Whether you share joy or sorrow, triumph or hardship.
Whether your family is new to this region or your family has lived here forever, your story is important.
For a full list of prompt questions and instructions for submitting your story, go to pbs.org/American Portrait.
The staff at KEET TV can help you record your story.
Please take a moment to submit your story to PBS American Portrait today. Thank you.
I'm James Faulk. This is North Coast Perspectives. Humboldt County Health Officer Teresa Frankovich was blunt in her assessment this week of where we stand in the epidemic as we settle into the summer season. Frankovich said she's been consulting with school districts and educators about how the new school year might unfold.
All of us probably across the community would agree that the optimal setting for children is to be in school. That being said, we recognize that schools are unique. Each school is unique in terms of its space and the number of children it serves and the way it's structured. And so what we're really working with the schools on doing is identifying what is feasible in their setting. What of the best practices can they incorporate into that setting? We understand it is not going to be perfect. There is certainly no way to socially distance a school full of children 100% of the time. What we're looking at is to really try and structure it so that for most of the day, children are able to distance in some fashion, particularly older children, and looking at some creative solutions in the lower age classrooms where the classrooms are stable all day and see what is able to be done.
Frankovich revealed this week that Humboldt County's COVID cases have disproportionately impacted the Hispanic community.
Locally, the most dominant effect is a disproportionate amount of cases in our Latino community. And to that issue, we have been really trying to work on outreach to the community. Obviously, there may be language barriers, and so we're really trying to address that and really trying to get information out so that people are aware about what precautions need to be taken and what they can do if they become ill.
With cases on the rise both here and across the country, she said the future will have its challenges, but we can help maintain control of the situation by doing those things we know can work.
I'm concerned, frankly, about increasing cases for several reasons. One is that the state as a whole is seeing a really rapid increase in cases. And because the entire state has some degree of travel, even before travel restrictions were lifted, there's more concern about people coming into the area who've had exposures and may be ill, and our residents traveling outside the area and picking up an infection. So I have concerns on that front. I also have concerns because in our community, we are opening up more, and that is just bringing us into contact with each other more and the potential for increased transmission. And finally, again, as a community, I think people have grown tired of COVID, and I completely get it. And it's summer and it's lovely, and all those normal things we do as groups in the summer are beckoning, and people want to gather. And gatherings we are seeing across the country are sparking outbreaks. And so as well as certain venues such as churches and bars. And so I just want to encourage people again that we need to be safe going forward as the risk increases. And so we need people to be masking and distancing.
Eureka Mayor Susan Seaman said that while there will be no citywide fireworks show this year due to COVID, families will be allowed to do their own. Such gatherings and the holiday in general can bring new people into Humboldt County, she said. It's our job to help protect them and to protect ourselves.
We've come a long way in the last 3 months, and we're now approaching the 4th of July. So I want to take this time to share some reminders. We're not having a public fireworks show or display this year, but families are allowed to have private fireworks. For many nonprofits who've had to cancel regular activities and events this year, their fireworks stand will be an important fundraiser. If you're going to buy fireworks, consider purchasing them from an organization that's important to you. Family or household picnics to celebrate are fine at home or nearby, but social gatherings with friends are still prohibited. We expect that the holiday weekend will draw more visitors to our area, and we're asking you to remember to wear your masks when you're in public. We want to keep our friends and neighbors safe, and it's up to us to demonstrate this simple and important act of kindness to people that come from outside of the region.
The city and its partners have been working for the past several months on shoring up the local child care system, Seaman said. Child care is a vital component in helping our economy to flourish and grow, she added.
I was happy to work with First 5 Humboldt and the Humboldt Area Foundation during discussions about increasing child care capacity in Humboldt County. Child care will be a crucial component for economic resilience as we come out of this crisis. More than half of our local facilities have been closed since shelter-in-place order in March. First 5 Humboldt and Humboldt Area Foundation have gotten together to invest $120,000 as financial incentives to local child care providers to help them reopen or stay open. Protective public health measures have reduced the number of children each provider can take care of, making finances of these small businesses very difficult. Incentive payments are currently set at $500 to $750 for each eligible child care facility. Additionally, First 5 and Changing Tides Family Services recently distributed critical supplies for Humboldt County child care providers caring for children of essential workers and vulnerable populations. The deliveries included boxes of 3-ply masks, disinfectant, children's books, wipes, non-contact thermometers, and packs of diapers. While researching the Eureka Children and Family Strategic Plan that was adopted by the city last year, access to childcare and support for the childcare industry were both identified as areas of focus before COVID-19. Throughout this crisis, I've been meeting with the local childcare task force, as have representatives from our community services team, to identify ways to help families through this difficult and still uncertain transition.
Scrap Humboldt, the much-beloved source of sustainable art and design materials, has announced this week that they will be closing their doors at the end of July. According to their website, the group's mission is to inspire creative reuse and environmentally sustainable behavior by providing educational programs and affordable materials to the community. In an emotional press release, Scrap Humboldt leaders said they took joy in helping crafty people of all ages find their inspiration while doing our part to keep useful things out of the landfill. One man's surgical mask is another man's criminal disguise. On Tuesday, a man walked into a 5th Street bank in Eureka wearing a typical COVID mask and bearing a letter demanding money. He passed it to the teller. No weapon was seen, and he left with an undisclosed amount of cash. The next morning, authorities had identified the suspect as Eureka resident Stephen David Long, age 70. With the help of community tipsters, they found Long at a 5th Street hotel, where he was taken into custody without incident on suspicion of robbery and violating parole. He was booked into the Humboldt County Correctional Facility. That's it for tonight. Thanks for joining us. For information on all things COVID, remember to visit humboldtgov.org for stats and figures on local cases, etc. To best weather this pandemic, remember to keep your distance, wear a mask, and wash your hands, and be healthy. Otherwise, as always, stay tuned and stay informed.